the mysterious, magical, massive mimetic manipulation of Marco. What's good, my fellow peasants? How you doing? Welcome back, guys. Continuing on, as I promised, as I teased up, my number one pick of Beardy McRoadman. In this video, we covered everything. Everything from Cloud's dad, Angiogenics, Gast, interdimensional Roche, Gilgamesh-esque, which I'll quickly say that's probably out the window now that in Rebirth, we kind of got a little teasy hint of what definitely looks like Gilgamesh's helmet. He's coming to 7. Huge. And then some of my favourite picks from that previous one, like Glenn Lodbrok. I definitely see why it could be him, but I'm not excited for it to be, personally. A lot of people hate me for that. I ain't playing Ever Crisis, I don't really care. And then Evan Townsend, really cool, good concept behind it. But just Jenova in its he form, it first came as a male, means it's assimilating us to recognising a unique Jenova form. And then my most El Succulente, Veiled Verdot. But yes, guys, my number one pick, the one I held back because it's too much mind-blowing juice, was Clone 49, Marco. Could this Beardy McRobington at the Rufus inauguration, could that be him? Well, let's explore. Because I will say, I'm probably like 50-50 in terms of if I actually think it is him. I'm not all the way there with that, but in terms of how much I want it to be, 100%. Because this would open the doorway to some gnarly ass concepts, some wild happenings, and a long running theory that, I mean, you guys know when I was first covering Marco, it was like a freaking year ago, bikepacking through Scotland like a wild hobo on the side of the coast, a big abandoned, haunted, Dracula-esque castle. And I remember tunneling in on the number 49, the specific choice of number. Because, you know, the clones, they only went up in OG to speculatively, not confirmed, Red 13. All we ever heard was that Red was also worried that he was a Sephiroth clone and would turn mad. Which I'll just quickly say on that front, we don't actually know the nature of Red, like his fear of what Hojo's done to him. Did he put SLs in Red? Is Red a Sephiroth clone? Is he part of the reunion theory? Why does his tail flash red, like, well, ablaze with fire? Why is that? Because we do know in the original concept that they did want to make a bestiality. Scrap that's again. A bestial version of the Sephiroth clones, because that was also tied with the idea there was going to be two others. There was going to be Cobalt 14 and Indigo 15, and that infused in Red's creature, his being, his species, was going to be Jenova cells, and that was going to give them magic affinity. It's the fiery tail. I think they've kind of now tied like the flame of Cosmo Canyon, like the constant burning bonfire. But you've got to question why Red's cubs don't seem to have fiery tails, and neither did Dene, the other one of the species that we met, a female of his race that he must have kids with later in the future. But regardless of that, because I don't want a tangent on whether or not Red 13 is a Sephiroth clone, what I'm going to share with you in hopefully a quick time, I'm actually going to time in myself, is some mind-blowing juice. Because since I just arrived in this new location, I'm down by the coast now in Colombia, I thought I'd come from some Costa del Sol vibes, got a cool little backdrop, some relaxation, theory craft, get on Tales of Arise, and then I arrived. And I was greeted with this. From 7:30 in the morning, 7:30, what do? What do? We have resorted to ordering McDonald's. That's how vulnerable we are right now. And so I lost my mind. I was going fucking bananas while my brain was being ripped open with, I've done like 30, 40, probably more theory videos over the years on this channel for Final Fantasy VII. So I am deep in the hole. Specifically after those last 3 or 4 days while dealing with all that fucking construction noise, my whole brain has pivoted, hard pivoted, into a whole new area, totally separate to what I first looked at Clone 49 for, which was the Kabbalistic numerology, Tibetan Book of the Dead, the idea that there's a purgatory, or certainly a play, a recontextualization on the origins of life in Final Fantasy VII. Najima and Katase Nomura, they're flipping the script. They're changing the mechanics of it. And I would just say there is a 10-3 video coming, guys, where, because I've read everything from Tales of Two Past, the recent TIFA Aerith Ultimania, I even went back and read the 2005 Ultimania Omega again, from top to bottom, and even a brand new one I've never seen before, picturing parts, Aerith parts, picturing Aerith's private parts, picturing the past. Yeah, this was a new Ultimania Najima dropped. It almost entirely covers Aerith's like child wall painting that we saw in the remake. I'll cover that later in this video because as I've been suffusing, I feel like I've had mako poisoning the last few days. The amount of memory and F7 lore just dropping into my brain, I've been gurgling out because there is so much new pivot and information, and it's mind-blowing and it's juicy, and I'm going to share it with you in this video, guys. But in reading all of it, the one thing that really jumps out to me is the significance of the Sephiroth clones, the Fel clones, how they're being played into the story, how vital and pivotal they are to Sephiroth's plans. No, in OG, they were just kind of used as a mode of transportation to get parts of Jenova around the world, to navigate away to the northern crater, and largely just played and demonstrating to us the battle of wills going on between Jenova and Sephiroth. But by the time we get to the northern crater, Sephiroth no longer has use for them. He yeets them into a canyon. He even starts hacking and slashing some of them down, no longer serving a purpose for him. Now, what is that reason? Because it was very vague, like why Sephiroth no longer needed those clones. I kind of theorized back in the day, or believed it was because largely he didn't want Jenova to reunion with too much of its cellular makeup. He didn't want her to be too completed because then his will would be suffocated again. He would not be able to enact his motives, his goals, achieve godhood for himself. But I think it's deeper than that. In fact, I freaking know it is, because I do believe a part of it is that, but also largely that after realizing what Cloud is, who Cloud is, and that essentially Cloud is all Sephiroth needs, this detail ripped a hole through my mind. Of all of these clones we had, again, it only went up to 13, but we have seen that numerology increase. We've had intermission introducing 16 and 20. We had Picturing the Past introducing 3 new ones. I think one of them is 24, a Lelisa. We had 2 introduced through the narrative POV of Jack Klein looking for his friend Glenn Reiner, soldier who went missing. We find it becomes a friggin' failed clone later down the line. We've also had a Geddy. Yes, Geddy Barsh von Ronsenberg introduced as well as all the ones that the kids at All Right introduced. We've got 8 names, 3 of them were female, 2 of them were siblings. Then we add the red species, 13, 14, and 15. Then you add Cloud and Zack, definitely still Zack. But I'll cover these 2 in a minute because they are biologically different. Did you guys know that? Maybe this was common knowledge to everyone. I thought that Cloud and Zack had undergone the same experimentation. Even Bree, a hardcore FF7 junkie who has played that game over like 15, 20 times. Neither of us knew this. And when we found this out, not only did it completely like change and contextualize the rivalry between Sephiroth and Cloud, the importance of Cloud to Sephiroth. Lend me your strength. Never be just a memory. The reason that Sephiroth is to this extent tethered to Cloud and Cloud's psyche, his consciousness, but also even going a massive way to explaining why the Sephiroth clones are as, I don't want to say degraded, because this is a word I've kept using. Degradation is of course very specific to how the G-Cell Operation Genesis end and the Soviets, those boys, degradation is a term that should just stay exclusively to them. So I'm going to use a new one for the Sephiroth clones. Ghoulish. How ghoulish they are. Because the clones, of course, are ghoulish, but they've not always been ghoulish. In fact, in OG, we have seen examples of fairly unghoulish ones. We've seen the process of becoming ghouly. But it is a process. And when you go and you look through all of the clones and see how that process has played out differently from OG, the speed of it, the number of them, like that's just what's clear to me. The quantity of clones is higher. And for every single like clone there is, Sephiroth clone, how many dead or failed experiments on Hojo's behalf like is coupled with that? 10s, 50s, hundreds, And later in this video, I'm going to show you why that could be potentially Aerith's causing. Like, Aerith has been the one to create more clones, but in doing that, she saved Zack Bear's life. Huh? What, Peasant? You're going to have to stay to the end of the video, because you're going to bloody love this, guys. So you might as well hit the like, subscribe and all button right now, because we're going in deep. So of course, out of all of those clones, and I think it'd be a good spot to also just mention, that's why I referenced Evan Townsend, because Annette Townsend, his mother, a massive caretaker, overseer of the failed clones, the Sephiroth clones, the S-Cell project. And very quickly also on Red, a lot of people say, no, he isn't a Sephiroth clone, because Red's capture predates by quite a few years the Nibelheim program, the experiment, the resettlement, bringing in fake Shinra employees to pretend the fire never happened. And that's when we really hear, like before Crisis and other parts of the compilation, that's when they took some of those survivors down into the basement and experimented on them. So some of them, the failed clones, are definitely Nibelheim folk, individuals, peoples, which hold that in your mind when you think about who could be the base, who is the person behind Marco. Clone 49. Where did he come from? What was his past life? Was he a Nibelheim survivor? Why does Tifa have so much affection or conviction? And he's a good guy. Might have a few problems, but he's a good guy. Hold on to it. But the other ingredient that I missed up until this point, and only going back through this lore with a fine tooth comb, is most of us are wrong on that. That was not the point in time in the timeline of 7 where Hojo first started the Sephiroth clone or Sephiroth copy. I think the translation is more accurate to copy than clone, for what we in English, like actual Japanese translation. That's not when that program started. It predates that by years and years. And that's why we have soldiers who went to Wutai. We have soldiers who were, again, sent on the behest of Aerith to locations around the world, came back ill, mako poisoned. They were also converted to the S-Cell program to try to create Sephiroth copies. Very similar process to what we see with Shalua, Shelk, the Sviet's scientist sister, searching the world for her. Other individuals have been searching for missing loved ones and comrades. I mean, they're picturing the past. Ultimately, I was just referencing is entirely that. There was a guy in it, and Najima just wrote this story, called Jack Klein. Not Garland, Jack Klein, clean. And he basically grew up with Aerith as kids in the Shinra building when she was a captive. They would push each other around, give each other bruises, and he formed a really close relationship with Aerith. It was even because of Jack Klein and his mother that basically triggered Aerith to have a trauma event. That was her first awakening moment. And basically after this guy grows up, he joins soldier. I don't know if he becomes an infantryman or a soldier, but then he's trying to find 2 of his friends. And he's going around searching for them, following loads of different leads. And I won't go through all the story, I'll cover this another time, because there's all the good stuff in here. More or less, turns out they became failed clones. And more or less, if you go back into the timeline, as well as one clone that I'm going to be revealing that could be, because while I'm theorizing that Marco, Clone 49, could be Biddy McRoadman, I'm also theorizing Marco is a mystery. I can't say too much, I don't want to spoil the next video, but basically guys, there has been a hidden clone under our nose the entire time. We never knew it, we never realized it, it was hiding in plain sight. And yet it is one of potentially the first ever Sephiroth clones, and one that has powers and skills unlike any of the others. Uncovering this mystery has been mind-rupturing. A nucleic explosion in my peasanty brain holio. And I'm going to be theorizing that not only is Marco this mystery element that I'm talking about, but also could be Veld and Verdot. All 3 rolled into one. What? Peasant, you crazy English bastard, what are you saying? It's really cool. But specifically to go to that, I need to first address Marco. We now go back, reconsider Marco. Because yeah, 49, relating to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Kabbalistic days of the Oma, that's how I created the Secrets of Bugenhagen, the 5 worlds of the Kabbalah theory, how I knew before even this latest Rebirth stuff was coming, that we were not done with world hops, what people are calling timelines. I was like, there's going to be a 3rd. Technically there's 5, but we're going to see 3 of them, and yeah, they're just concentric circles of spirituality. And I've got to say, everything that we are seeing at the moment in this rebirth is really confirming that was definitely a tunnel to look down. It was a correct avenue of looking. From my POV, I could be completely wrong. It just makes so much sense that Square would use Kabbalistic lore when this was what they built many of the premises of 7 upon. But yeah, now going specifically to where Marco has been. And honestly, I'm just going to say out of the gate, I think that Sephiroth is using his pawns not only to keep an eye and like a hand and a manipulation, an ability to move and control vents, to bring people into contact that should never have been in contact, just like it says in the synopsis, entwining fates and bringing about happenings that benefit Sephiroth's goals. Sephiroth Clones are his agents, his vehicle in which he is doing that. And that doesn't start at the opening of the alleyway scene of like Aerith, at the start of the remake, which is where a lot of us think like, this is where this began. Sephiroth came back to this point. No, I think we have conclusive proof at this point that Sephiroth has been doing things months, maybe even years before the opening of the remake we just played, because we know 2 things. We know that Marco was placed in the care of TIFA, and has arguably been there for over a month, which was where Cloud was supposed to be. Instead, Marco's been there getting all the nurturing, all of the attentiveness and the healing that is unique to Tifa, a superpower that quite literally fucked up Sephiroth's goals in OG. It's what prevented him winning the battle for Cloud's mind. And now one of Sephiroth's clones has been there, seeing and receiving, gathering and observing information about her, knows her potentially now even on a personal level. And then even just separate to that, Goddo being in jail. In the rebirth, we are seeing Wutai and Shinra go to war. And this difference was already set up. This isn't just a rebirth line thing. In episode Yuffie, we saw that Son and Yuffie are sent in an official capacity by this interim provisional government to steal the ultimate materia right from under Shinra's nose. And that's why they end up meeting up with Avalanche, because those cells are working with Wutai. And this is now leading to all-out war on the world. Something that, you know, the obvious one is why Sephiroth wants that. I think that's very clear as day. I've said before, you know, more suffering on the planet equals more souls, more torment, more corruption of people's mindsets. We know that, but I say we know, but I think it's a massively overlooked theme. You need to hold this in your mind for how I can explain why this is Marco, because the obvious question we have to answer is Marco was very ghoulish here. How is he now regenerated? How is he looking more like an actual person? What is in the story and in the lore that could substantiate this transition if it is Marco? Well, my friends, I feel to answer that. Yeah, it's this area of how psyche and the psychological elements is played in Final Fantasy VII. Not just changing the collective populace's ideology, which is absolutely something we see on the Shinra end, you know, with propaganda and indoctrination, you know, even what Stamp is and what we saw Zack go through in Crisis Core. And so what even enabled Shinra to get support to go and attack a nation that arguably did nothing to them? Wutai. They were an innocent nation. And like I said in my previous video, the soldiers directly call Zack out. Like, do you enjoy torturing people? If you have any sense of justice, you'll come and you'll work for us. We can't pay you much, but at least you can right the wrongs that you were actively a part of. Zack now being alive and just being, you know, almost killed by Shinra, where he could side on this war is huge. But even separate to that theme, you know, just even psychology being corrupted by corporations and big government and big tech, arguably even, I'll be getting onto Chadley and AI later. But now just on the galactic parasitic squid level of Jenova. Jenova works, in fact, it's his entire ace in the hole to go in and just by being in proximity, just in touching distance, not even just with actual touching of people, is able to do a two-way conduit. It's able to pass genetic information, corrupt the organism and the individual, turning it violent with its actual cellular DNA if it gets into their body. But then there's the mental level. So there's like a whole mind, body and spirit correlation playing into this story that, yeah, also by just being close to them, Jenova can soul read. Read the informations, their mannerisms, their thoughts, their emotions, their feelings, and mimic, replicate that individual back onto others entirely for the purpose of turning them into monsters. This is what Jenova did to the Cetra. That's the method that she brought about their annihilation. And it's very important to remember this. If you think about Marco, like having Jenova cells and therefore some Jenova abilities. Some, Cloud has them, Zack has them. I'll cover this in the Ultimate Omega in a second. Just remembering that by being around someone's vicinity and touching them can activate these abilities. I mean, separate to even Jenova, we saw this with the Whispers. Anyone who even just touched Cloud, that's how Rufus saw the Whispers. That's how even at the bridge scene in Shinra, Sephiroth's floating down, memory Sephiroth, the one just in Cloud's mind, far more villainous and definitely separate to Ori Sephiroth. You ever notice the difference between those? The one that's in Cloud's mind is always like far fucking crazier with like a smirk that almost becomes like comically anime, because that is what Sephiroth is like in Cloud's mind. He is that bad, he is that villainous. It is absolutely not the same as complete Ori Sephiroth. I mean, the nature of that is clear from Memory Sephiroth says, Cloud, you're too weak to save anyone. That's very different to Education One saying, lend me your strength. You couldn't get like more oppositional messaging because they're different Sephiroths. And both of those are different to Jenova Sephiroth, Jenovaroth, and Illusion One. That coupled also with a much broader theme in the game, which is the mimetic legacy. Well, mimetics comes from the Greek word mimeme, and the guy who coined it, he was looking for a monosyllable that sounded a bit like gene. So he was trying to bridge the gap, and it's kind of a woo-woo and not really recognized science, you know, trying to bridge the gap between memory and like physicality, actual like biological structure. But of course this is a fantasy game, so absolutely Jenova does bridge this gap. And why? Broader psychological changes on a planetary level. Not only something that Jenova can do, but arguably wants and needs to do. Because again, by changing and making the collective consciousness more quagmired and more nefarious thinking, and even on the individual level, this is what allows Jenova to manipulate and have greater control over the host. The more hosts she has that over. We saw this in Maiden Who Travels Through the Planet. Some souls are trapped, individualized in there because of life regrets. They fucked up, they done goofed. You know, Jesse Biggs, Dean and Wedge. But they arguably want to move past their life traumas. But in that story, Aerith also came across souls who didn't. They were vengeful, hateful, spiteful, and willingly assimilated themselves with Sephiroth. And those kind of souls are ones that are usually victims or perpetrators of war crimes. So setting up a war on the planet means more souls assimilating Sephiroth, which means greater net control over Lifestream, which inhibits the opportunity at the end that when Holy comes down, like I said, I think this is ultimate goal, the Lifestream cannot rally, it cannot help Holy to counter Meteor, and victory. Team Jenova Wrath. I think it makes logical sense. But yeah, Jenova's genetic structure is a two-way conduit. So both the passing of genes, but also the absorbing of it. Also the sowing of a mimetic legacy. And I would just say, I think even Aerith does this. You know, there's a reason why she's called Mother in Advent Children, working with children with the flower bed, the Advent Children, the attempt that Aerith is constantly trying to make to reinstill Cetra and nomadic ideology back into the planet, and arguably that's why she becomes like goddess of the life stream, more or less. And souls start assimilating with Aerith. There's this mimetic battle of collective will and ideology, which arguably that's what the life stream is. It's a collection of memory and will of souls. But yeah, the guy who came up with the word mimetic, he said, I hope my classist friends will forgive me. I abbreviate mimeme to meme. If it is any consolidation, reading's hard. If it's any consolation, it could alternatively be thought of as being related to memory or the French word meme. Basically, mimetics being an evolutionary culture, describing it as an approach of cultural information transfer or understanding it. Analogous to a gene, the meme was conceived as a unit of culture. A unit of culture. So an idea, belief, pattern or behavior which is hosted in the minds of one or more individuals and which can reproduce itself, in the sense jumping from the mind of one person to the mind of another. Thus that would otherwise be regarded as one individual influencing another to adopt a belief. It is seen as an idea replicator reproducing itself in a new host. So it's like ideas and concepts, units of culture can become a being unto itself. It finds new hosts and replicates through it. But what allows that replication, well, like I said, as with genetics, particularly under Dawkinson's interpretation, a meme's success may be due to its contribution to the effectiveness of its host. Oh, what the fuck are you going on about, Pez? I'm totally lost in this video. Hold this. The effectiveness of an idea, of a meme, of mental influence being based on the effectiveness of the host. So how impressionable, how easily are ideas planted in their mind, and that person accepts the ideas, takes them on, believes them to be true. And then indeed, how willing is that person then to pass those ideas on to others, make them their own. And this is a massive part, not just the compilation as a whole, where we've had things like tessellation, which is the organization of memory, the DMW system, how it is that Zack, passing of the living legacy, the Buster Sword, you will live for the both of us. The passing of, like, even Angeal's ideology of dreams, honor and pride. Cloud's willingness to believe at points that he is a puppet, he is empty, he doesn't know who he is, everything is a lie. I killed Tifa, you know I did, Cloud, so who is she? Trust in me, I am your everything. And that in those moments where we see Cloud believe those narratives pushed onto him by Sephiroth, manipulated in him on a cellular level by Jenova, what we see in those moments is Cloud becoming more and more clone-like. We do. We see Cloud hand off the black materia, world-ending apocalyptic magic to Sephiroth willingly. We see him beg Hojo for a tattoo. We see him beat the shit out of Aerith in the Temple of the Ancients. We see him nearly decapitate her at the Forbidden Capital. And what is it in all of those situations that either stops him or brings him back? It's his teammates, it's his friends, it's the people he's made connections with. That this is a core part of people knowing themselves, having a strong sense of self. And I'll circle back on this in a minute. I did not realize, and the thing that blows my mind, guys, when I said that Cloud and Zack are biologically different, that there's not just a mental difference, but there's a biological difference. And before I go into that, I would just ask you the question. They're both in the tank for 4 years. They both underwent the same experimentation with Hojo. Then they break out of the tank, and I knew it was a long time, but I did not realize they were on the run over 9 months. 9 months! Zack was carrying Cloud's incapacitated ass. Poor guy. But even just on that, what is it in your minds, guys, that you believe is the reason why Zack was able to come out of the tank, largely be unaffected by Jenova's cells? He can still move, talk, fight, while Cloud's in a coma the whole time. What if you guys always pin the reason onto that as? What do you think it was? Let me know in the comment section. Give the video a pause. After that, come back. So yeah, to be honest, guys, on this front, I largely pinned it as a mental reason. I think that's just my natural bias. I kind of like the mental, metaphysical, psychological elements. It's my real draw to Final Fantasy and why I get such a fix from it, especially Final Fantasy VII. That it's because Zack's a puppy. He's a good boy. He has a good state of consciousness. Not only does he have a strong sense of self, again passed from Angeal, dreams, pride, honor, something that Zack definitely accumulates a lot of over his character arc in Crisis Core. But it's also the fact that he has a strong sense of duty and responsibility and connection to other people. Not just in protecting Cloud, getting back to Aerith, that all of this state of consciousness that Zack had was what was his large wall and shield against Jenova's influence. And I think that's true. I think there is a lot to substantiate that. You know, there is something that happens when a person knows themselves, when their memories, their focus, their principles, their ideals become aligned, that has physiological healing benefits. It also allows characters to do like crazy power-ups in the game. This is something that can't be overlooked. I mean, just taking Cloud's memory dive, for example. Do you not think it's a little bit crazy that Cloud, for the second time, fell into the live stream, was mako poisoned out of his asshole, out of his ass in Midil, just like blurp. And then he falls into the live stream, TIFA's trying to get him out of there in the wheelchair. They do the derpy tumbling in, just to say, into more freaking mako. And then they have the whole aligning of Cloud's mind. In that process, he comes back out completely healed. Completely! Which is crazy and is purely showing us that it was through aligning of the mental that it healed him on the physiological. A lot of people have even wondered, well, how is it that TIFA didn't get mako poisoned? She fell into the live stream. Mako poisoning is essentially being exposed to the live stream. And when you get a over bombardment and exposure to essentially what is memory, raw memory of the planet itself, it totally overloads the mind. Why didn't Tifa get it? Well, ultimately actually tells us that is by being in Cloud's psyche and with Cloud's affection to protect her, that it was actually Cloud's psyche that was protecting, creating a wall of shielding around Tifa's psyche. Whoa! So she wasn't just helping Cloud in that, Cloud was also helping her. And that it was through the joint bonds, the bondage of the two of them, that kept them largely impervious to the high exposure that definitely should have wrecked their butts. So that's just another example of how having close connections and people and not experience like isolation and knowing yourself, your identity, having it through others. That's an example of it working. On the total inverse, that's of course where Sephiroth turned into a monster and lost himself. It was after Angeal's death, Genesis's, reading Gast's research and feeling utterly betrayed by the guy who was like his only parental figure in his mind. Sephiroth having all of those very, very personal psychological important pillars to himself deconstructed was what allowed Jenova influence to totally hijack him, override him and turn into a monster. Happened with the Cetra, even just like smaller examples, like Clone 2, for example. Clone 2 in OG was this guy are sick. In OG Remake, he's the guy who's completely ghoulish and collapses in front of Cloud and Aerith. What's the difference between these two? Well, I mean, you could say there's been a flip up in the remake. Aerith isn't playing in the same way. Her intuition, her instinct, and what she's doing on this line is totally different. Is that not potentially the reason why Clone 2, who in OG, Aerith was going and visiting him a lot, taking a lot of pity and sympathy and empathy for him? When we go to see him with Cloud, she's like, yeah, this guy is sick. She's obviously been going and spending some time with him, showing him some care. And it's in OG that after we leave Midgar, when we go back, we hear from local residents that dude who was sick got up and walked out with a bunch of black robes. It's showing us, guys, people and connections, I think, is absolutely an aspect of what creates the mental weakness, the mental vulnerability that not only allows Jenova to take more of a hold over the person as a whole, but it's also what puts the Sephiroth clones in the conditions that they are. So I had that mental aspect that Zack just has a good state of mind, and that's why the crisis course says that the scientists and their reasoning, like Hojo, is because of soldier conditioning. Because he's conditioned as a soldier, that's why it's a total failure on Zack. It has no effect on him. But in Cloud the Infantryman, it caused a total breakdown of his mind. But that's the really core part, guys. And I did not know this before. I feel like I might be a noob for not knowing this. In the Ultimania Omega, I'll just read this directly from the source. So Jenova cells. The cells from Jenova were used in the Jenova project and soldier surgical procedures. Those who have been infected with these cells undergo physiological changes, such as improvement of their physical abilities and partially receiving Jenova's abilities. Hold on to this, guys, because for my next part, for again this mystery that no one knows about, hidden mystery clone, it has the power of Jenova to a level that we have never seen before. And I've covered this before, the dream weaving, so not just the mimicry, the cellular corruption and manipulation and hijacking, dream weaving, weaving worlds of illusion. My Cloud Dreamweaver theory, I definitely think it's a theme in that. Like Cloud can overlay Nibelheim. You could say it's just in his mind onto Midgar. He does say in OG as well, I'm Cloud, master of my own illusory worlds. But I think it's going to the next level. For me, again, I said the Aerith date scene was the biggest one, where it's clearly in a dream, but it's more than a dream. And Cloud opens by saying, what is this? This was Aerith's response.
How is this? Is this a dream?
Maybe. You tell me.
You tell me! That could mean a million one things, but I do think it is like, yo, you tell me, Cloud. Like the same as how even in OG, in the Forbidden Forest, when Aerith comes floating down and they have that whole scene, like Cloud in his Jenova infected pure S-cell body, I think he also has shown to us through the series, he can demonstrate Jenova-esque abilities. And it's what lends to how elaborate these like mental aspects in Cloud end up going to. And it says, because it's right here, however, mentally weak people are unable to withstand Jenova's will, and it sometimes brings about mental abnormalities. Mentally weak people. So that right there, yeah, it does confirm why Zack was so resistant to the cells. Zack isn't mentally weak, Cloud on the other hand was. But now, as for the biological aspect, right here, Jenova cells, which Hojo treated with a special process for use with the Sephiroth copies. From the initial S and the fact that the cells are used in the Sephiroth copy experiments, it is surmised that they relate to Sephiroth's own cells. Within the game, Genesis believed that his degradation could be halted if he obtained these cells and injects them into his body. But in actuality, when a copy took in the cells, so that's talking about in Crisis Core, when one goes and grabs Zack's hair, fucking creep, and eats Zack's hair, it's because they believe, Hollander, Genesis, that Zack and Cloud are the same. They both have pure S cells, but then they are proven wrong. Because rather than being cured, the process is sped up of turning them into a monster. However, the cells used then were Zack's, and it was not attempted with Sephiroth's pure S cells or Cloud's, which were considered pure. Whoa, that is crazy info. That means that Zack was impure and Cloud was pure. And like specifically when I went down the tunnel of thinking why that is the case, well, we know that experimentations are to different degrees, different ingredients and different methods of experimentation are used. What happens to the Nibelheim survivors and what kind of experiments are done on those versus ones that are done on the S-Cell Sephiroth Clone project 5-10 years ago, because it does date back as far as that, to like Soldier who had gone to Wutai, or again to Aerith's paintings. How many S cells, like specifically Sephiroth DNA versus Jenova, and then on top of all of that, how much mako is infused into it. We know there's so many different varieties and variations within that. Mechanoids, for example, have like no Jenova or S cells. They are just what happens when you expose a being purely to mako. And that right there, guys, is, I believe, why Zack is impure, despite having the same experiments and believing from a scientific standpoint, like Hojo believing he was making a pure S cell to create, I think, pure Sephiroth soldiers, ones that are clones of Sephiroth, as powerful as him, but don't have to go through the entire gestation period. I mean, you can tell with Hojo, the prick, I have so much disdain for this guy, that the process of having to inject it into a fetus, a baby, which right there means that Sephiroth was exposed to nothing else, because it was from birth, it was in the womb that he was exposed, and nothing else. That having to then gestate and wait for that thing to grow up is a very slow process for creating super soldiers. I think with Zack and Cloud, he's looking for a quicker turnaround. How could you make one in a few years only? But the problem and the difference between Cloud and Zack is that Zack was already exposed to Jenova cells and Mako, the Mako showers, flashy eyes. Zack's DNA was already irreparably altered at that point that he was exposed, whereas Cloud had no exposure. And that's why Cloud, being the last of the pure S cells, that's why Hollander in Crisis Core was pursuing and tried to pluck a few of Cloud's bloody hairs to have them. And then Zack has to stop him. And then Zack also realizes that Genesis isn't going to stop pursuing Cloud. That's when Zack goes to have the showdown with Genesis, because he knows that these G-Cell boys are that desperate that they won't stop hunting Cloud either. And once I held that in my mind, that's when I shitted. I shitted my pants, because I've been looking for a reason. Like, not only does Cloud having pure S cells, pure, the last of the pure, really tee up why he's such a valid vessel, potential vessel candidate for Sephiroth, the level of which Sephiroth is tethered to Cloud. Arguably even why Cloud has the level of strength that he has in Advent Children, why his capacity and capability to just like go way beyond anyone else's power scale in the whole world is that strong. But then I started thinking of Chadley. Again, yeah, he's just shown up in the Rebirth with a little Boy Scout outfit. He's like, I'm gonna go see the world, thanks to you, Cloud, because what we saw, and I've been trying to figure out a reason for it. Why was it that Chadley said that by data mining Cloud, by reading Cloud in the VR, on what is still a biological level, because while it seems to us like, the machines, that's all just like digital, we've seen the breach in Final Fantasy VII between the live stream and technology. It is there. Not only do we see it in the VR sequence, Shinra showing the propaganda video of the Cetra and Shinra are good boys helping the planet, and then that flipping to an apocalyptic ending. So not only did we see that then, we also saw it in how we get the summons. Again, the summons are previous etc. who dedicated their life force to become guardians of the live stream, and the summons are manifested through the live stream. Yet here we are acquiring them in Chadley's VR. Meaning, for me, certainly at least, I believe it's pretty conclusive that Chadley is trying to create a digital live stream. The fact that this is the system later on that Hojo is able to become Weiss in Dirge of Cerberus, essentially immortal, and all the other crazy tech stuff that is going on. I mean, even just the nature of the live stream creating weapons, like mechanical creatures. There is a merge between live stream and technology, and I can't feel any other way now that Chadley's gonna take over the world and end everything. No, it's certainly suspicious though. It's fucking suspicious that he's creating these big like pillars, or having Cloud and us in the Rebirth activate them. The very Horizon Zero Dawn, it's for like us to access like view of the map and shit. But if we activate enough of those around the planet, and Chadley's creating a digital live stream, is this something that could offset, if Sephiroth does get greater net control over the live stream, that it's a digital live stream that comes and helps Holy to stop Meteor? Is this something that's building up as like a trump card that Sephiroth is not expecting? But even just right there, I kept asking, why did Chadley say that in Cloud he found unlimited potential?
I sensed something within you, something I knew would allow me to break free of my chains. By identifying and studying a subject with infinite potential such as yourself, I could adhere to the directives imposed upon me, all the while pursuing my plans for independence in secret.
Why? The same Chadley who also just set Weiss upon us and Nero into the game. Weiss, whose last words were, "I'll see you in deep ground," who after receiving things from Chadley in that VR section went, "Shit, I'm feeling real good."
You should, however, notice some improvements due to my latest update. Indeed, I'd venture to say you're stronger now than you've ever been.
Stronger than I've ever been. A big claim, little man. Let the hunt begin!
Weiss, a G-cell degrading being, part of the G-cell program. And Cloud's pure S-cells were what Genesis was hunting, because that was the cure to offset the degradation. It's what Genesis and the Spheres needed. And Chadley just got that data. Oh, holy shit. That's gotta be it. That's crazy. That's crazy. And specifically how this, yes, this is still a Marco video, how that relates to Marco is, I also do believe that, again, that touching element is something, not only what allowed people to see the whispers, but Marco also did it to Cloud. He grabbed his ankle. That's when we first saw the very iconic march of the clones to the Northern Crater, the first reunion. And then we saw it in the Rebirth again, except this time in this shot, Cloud is that clone in that place. Almost identical to the shots. It's now Cloud. And this is where I start really thinking Marco, like, is he a Cloud clone? Because I do think that part of Cloud's Jenova, Sephiroth abilities is to also absorb information. I do believe that with the 10 Sephiroths, and I've theorized this a long time, that each one of the Sephiroth represents a team member. I mean, the Sephiroth of Tiferet, Beauty, I mean, read the name of that, Tiferet, TIFA, and that as Cloud, and I think this is something that Sephiroth observed, came close to becoming a broken vessel, a ghoulish Sephiroth clone. The thing that made him go the opposite way, become even more invigorated, even more powerful, was from what he was absorbing from his teammates. That this was a real visceral, tangible power that Sephiroth was, Cloud was absorbing. And I think Sephiroth, in wanting Cloud's strength, lend me your strength. You don't think that Sephiroth has really looked and understood what it is that gives Cloud his strength? Again, not only did Cloud suddenly get healed from the mako poisoning from his memory dive with Tifa, the fact that he was on the road comatose for 9 months with Zack, and then isn't it a bit funny that as Zack dies for his buddy, that suddenly Cloud comes too. And yes, he walks all the way across the Midgar Waste with the Buster Sword. On the day Zack dies, after 9 months of being flat out cold. You don't think that's a bit of a coincidence? It's a very big coincidence. And yes, he went and like gurgled out in the train station, you know, and was still sick. He wasn't like fully healed after that. But very quickly after coming back into contact with Tifa, and what we saw is Cloud was out cold, and then Tifa comes and we see again the flash, just like we saw the flash of white at Zack's death, which shows an imprint. Those flashes are a memory or even just a physiological Jenova imprinting, overwriting something in Cloud. That's what that process is showing us. And we see Cloud have one at the train station with Tifa. And that's when Jenova had mimicked things off of Tifa, Tifa's memories of Cloud, her understanding of him. And Jenova used that to construct an identity. Again, that's why Cloud's identity isn't just built from Zack, it's also built from Tifa. That construction of an identity is what brings Cloud somewhat to and allows him to function. And I do believe my main theory here, guys, is the reason why this could be Marco and he is less degenerate, and this is a dope idea, is if Sephiroth has seen that it's these friends and these people and these contacts that give Cloud his real intangible like power that Sephiroth wants, would he not create a clone, make a clone, insert one, renumber one, and place it in Tifa's care, place it in the Shinra building? The one that stabbed Barrett was Marco and President Shinra. And also have us fight a Jenova we never fought before. Jenova Dreamweaver was a brand new fight. We only fight Jenova Birth on the cargo ship in OG. Then we fight Life, Death, Synthesis. So why did Sephiroth intentionally, purposely have us fight a new version, a Dreamweaver, and the same clone that in the form of number 2? This guy are sick. The rapidly degenerated one more than the OG. It was number 2 that picked up 49 and Sephiroth hightailed out of there with 49, diving off the building, demonstrating the importance of Marco in his like overall scheme and plan, I really think. But that right there means that Marco has physically been in contact with every single one of the party members. And that also includes Yuffie, because Marco was also following her. In episode intermission, Marco was ghosting Yuffie. And that gives me 2 fat old brain cannons that not only did Marco potentially acquire 5 of the 10 Sephiroths, or just absorbing the same kind of empowering traits from people that Cloud did, and not just generally people, the same people. It could arguably also be the formation of a Cloud clone. And that in doing that, that's what would make him less degenerated. That's what would make him more him. And what if Marco does have a personality, a persona beneath it, that Tifa knows? What if it is someone from Nibelheim, that Sephiroth chose the base of this new like trump card clone to take the strength of Cloud, or certainly if Cloud doesn't ideologically align, something that's going to be an ace in the hole, a fucking contingency plan within a contingency plan. And what would our capacity be to shut down Marco if it's somebody that Tifa knows? That's why she had an affection. Basically, I don't think it's going to be Brian, her dad, because I do think he was dead at Nibelheim. But what if it's, say for example, one of the 4 things? Najima just wrote a whole thing in Tales of Two Paths about the 4 boys that Tifa hung out with. You know, the ones that Cloud hated and was really jealous. What if one of those boys is freaking Marco? Tifa knows him. And what if Marco, this guy, could now speak? What did he say to Tifa? Now that he knows her, that Tifa has some form of affection and care for him, he's ingratiated himself to us. Basically, would this not be a crazy like spanner in the cogs of Tifa and Cloud? The Sephiroth was always trying to fuck up in OG, but he failed. He did manage to break the trust between us, and that's what kept Cloud on mental track. I will love this to be this concept, that we have Marco really being a spanner in the works. And yeah, honestly, I think Tifa should have like a full-blown affection for him, and basically Marco should like literally cuck Cloud right in front of his face. I'm shitting, I'm joking, but maybe. But this idea was then what made me think, well, why is he called Marco? Where did he get that name from? Who gave it to him? And this is where the two potential definitions of Marco is going to blow your mind. So not only has Marco been in all the situations to potentially have been the agent that Sephiroth used to set up the Wutai Shinra war, because what do you need? You need to destabilize both ends. Marco was the clone he stabbed President Shinra with. He also had Marco following the princess, the arguably like current leader of the Wutai War. If this is Marco, that is Beardy McRoadman, what's the scene? It's Rufus's inauguration. He's firing a massive weapon of war saying, "Welcome to the New World Order, bitches." And the cloney dude, if it's a clone, is walking away with a smirk, as in he was watching. His mission in that moment was to observe and to ensure that Yuffie was playing her role, going down the places and the veins that she's supposed to, not to interfere with this interim government declaring war, ensuring that Rufus was going the way he was, that President Shinra was taking out all the ingredients to start the war. And that's just what we've seen. We can't speculate where Marco may have been before this point, or what clones or agents or how Sephiroth may have destabilized this geopolitical situation. But there I was, by looking at it, I was like, Marco War. I had this thought in my head. And then I went and looked up his name, and guys, Marco is from the Italian male name, derived from the name of the Roman god of war. Mars, Ares in Greek mythology. Another definition of Marco is bringer of war. Well, maybe, I don't know, potentially. That would be wild, but then the other name, and I said this to guys on stream, I was like, yo, what do you think's going on with Marco? And I had 4 people type it. 4 people type this, and I see why, because what's your instinct to say back if I go, Marco, Polo. What are you saying, Pez? You know, like legitimately, would it be based on Marco Polo? Because that idea that Sephiroth has got an agent that's going and tagging every significant person in Cloud's party, including Cloud himself. And Jenova's ability, when put into physical contact or even just close proximity contact, has the ability to soul read, literally take memories, imprint them. Is Marco based on Marco Polo? Because for anyone who doesn't know the game, basically one player is chosen as the it, very ghoulish, very it-ish, and that player with closed eyes tries to find and tag any of the other players, relying on hearing to find someone to tag. The player who is it shouts Marco, and the other players all respond by shouting Polo, which the it player uses to try to find them. I was cooking this idea up in my head for like days, walking around Colombia, and I had these 2 situations. This is a sign.
Sign from God.
It's a sign.
You look very sweaty.
Yes, sweaty Colombian messes coming down to the beach. But I'm just a day away from doing this video that you are watching now. And you remember what it's about?
Marco Polo.
Could there actually be a game of Marco Polo going on?
Maybe.
He's going in, he's tagging people.
Yeah.
Potentially. But I'm thinking about it in my head. This confirms to me, yes. You are a fucking wizard, Peasant, and you've got it absolutely accurate.
San Marco! San Marco! No. It's Marcos.
Close enough.
No.
San, take off the A-N.
it.
S Marco, SL Marco.
Oh my God.
SL Pure Cell.
Marco! So you're gonna make me pass out.
And there we go, that's why this is conclusively fact, because come on guys, that's not just synchronicity, that's the planet transmitting this theory, these concepts into my brain. Something on the wider, the FF7 gods wanted me to come today and give you this theory, give you this information. I actually think there could be some legitimacy to this because, yeah, Marco Polo, for anyone who also doesn't know, was a 13th century Italian trader and explorer. This is where the game gets its name from. And Marco Polo, I think he was in service at one point to, it was one of the Khans. It wasn't Genghis Khan, like his granddad or his son up on the screen. And Marco Polo travelled all the way from east to west, and of course the Mongolian warring tribes and all the crusades that were going on in Shire. That basically there was war going on the planet, and Marco Polo was travelling between the two. So even that right there fits, but where the it part of like going and tagging people, a blind person, according to one whimsical explanation, is that because Marco Polo, legend has it, the famed explorer didn't really have a clue where he was going. This being reflected in the it player's behaviour, just walking and moving around on intuition and instinct. That right there literally explain what Marco is doing, potentially, like the clones, and the positioning of them and why they're showing up in the significant and very different ways that they are, totally unlike OG. And I think that if Marco has been Marco Poloing and being it and tagging enough, that could, similar to Cloud, be something that is acquiring genetic soul memory information from other individuals and causing him to be far more powerful, more human-like, more beardy, less robe, or nicer robes, just nicer. And like I said, guys, I'm not done with this theory, but I've gone on far too long and I'm going to round this out. But yeah, this next video is going to be showing what Marco is attached to and why that is attached to Veiled, a whole amalgamation that's going to be absolutely nuts. So be sure to watch that video, but I'll just end on a couple of points as I was going through my research. I mean, looking at the symbol on the back of their robes, to me that is very clearly Jenova. Look at the similarity. So that's a very simple explanation. But what I teed up to you early in the video, if you remember me saying how Aerith may be the one who created more clones and could have done it on the planet's behest to save Zack, or just instinctually, intuition, just making her do it, is because basically in Picture in the Past, yeah, Aerith would write stuff and Shinra, President Shinra, would take all of the locations seriously. He'd send loads of soldier and infantrymen to the locations that Aerith had drawn. These were called the Special Survey Units. They went to whichever location, but all of the missions resulted in casualties, and anyone who did return alive ended up with severe mako poisoning. Now, of course, Aerith, like little Aerith, when she's drawing stuff, her intuition and what she senses from the planet will be pockets of live stream conduits, locations heavily saturated in live stream, but also arguably where the clones have been, where corrupting forces in the live stream. Aerith is just transmitting what's happening to the live stream, and I believe that these individuals who were sent in Soldier, and very few returned alive, again Geddy Back and Glenn Reiner were two of those who became failed clones from being sent on these special survey units. It says these victims would be declared dead, even if they weren't, and turned over to R&D for experimentation. From these experiments came the first Sephiroth clones. So this, honestly guys, makes me think, because I really did think that, you know, again, the alleyway scene was just the opening of the remake, but when we know that events have been set up before this point, what I even have to question is how far back? Does this mean that the characters have led whole different lives? Like when you look at Najima writing Picture in the Past or Tales of Two Pasts, new stories that are different from the origin stories of like even childhood points of our characters from what their childhood stories were in OGs. Basically, have they lived entirely different OG lives? So remake Aerith, even when she was young, somewhere in her soul, in her subconscious, in her psyche, in her not cognizant but intuition mind, was the past life she had with Cloud, the gang, with Zack. Now, as she's writing these things, it's different. Like young Aerith is drawing things differently to what she may have done in OG. And that this new writing on a new planet that is fucked up in all new significant ways with clones on the planet, or like Sephiroth wanting more clones to be made, because there's 49 of them, that in some way changed what Aerith was drawing. Because again, part of her drawing did have big black points in it, dark areas, very sinister stuff. There's a potential idea that this meant that more soldier were sent to these places and more of them died, more of them were turned into clones, less of them survived. And that's why, when I saw this, the consequences of 49 Sephiroth clones and special survey units, the most obvious consequence of these missions were the casualties. Yeah, the sheer number of them. Casualties that would not have been sustained if not for Aerith's visions, more mako poisoning, more clones, more deaths. All means there would have been fewer Shinra troops in the future, and having fewer troops could change the key outcome of some of the events that need to take place, like this. Dudes, I've never seen this scene side to side like this. I can't believe it, but here I was thinking Zack potentially survived just because the ghosts were going and taking like bullets and guns and like defusing some bombs and something to give Zack a fighting chance, or maybe Sephiroth set up that way. No, there's just a indisputably lower number of troopers there, like almost by half. Just categorically less. That is wild. That is not something that Square Enix just like, oh well, we didn't wait to look at that and we didn't know how many troopers to like put in there. No, they knew. This is a obvious and a conscious choice, and this to me is just like more proof. This is how Zack survived. There were just less people there. I mean, it does even make sense with Zack getting up and saying, "Oh, is that all of them?" And what a strange thing for Zack to say. It's because his intuition, his mind, part of his soul psyche, remembers the past where he fought and he's like, I feel like there should be more. There just weren't more. And is it because of Aerith's painting? Sending more people because Sephiroth created more clones. So it's like, is Sephiroth, did he somehow infect young Aerith's visions? I mean, he was in the live stream. He has control over the live stream. He has many souls assimilated that could potentially be nefarious whispering voices. Will Aerith truly always transmitting and drawing things purely from the live stream's messaging, or I don't know how to compute any of this, and I've only just begun the ascent of crazy. That's like literally 2 of the 10 pages of juice that I've got to let loose on your caboose. But you've done really well making it this far. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Let me know what you think about all of that. Anything that jumped out, any headcanons, any points, what you found really cool and interesting. Did you know all of that? Did you know the pure SL Cloud, like detail? What do you think Chadley is doing? Do you think there's any chance that could be Marco Clone 49, Roby Mook Beardman? Personally, I think there is a means, like a lore and plot logic to what would potentially allow Marco to be able to transition ghoulishness to that. I think there's a real clear explanation of why he could be there, where he's been in the remake. That yes, it could be that he's Marco, the Roman god agent, setting up war, or just the Marco Polo going and tagging on behalf of Sephiroth. All the things that be required to gather more data on Cloud, even potentially recreate a Cloud, recreate his strength, and why we specifically fought Jenova, a Dreamweaver we never fought before, and I think I know where that power specifically came from. You just got to watch the next video to find out. But good to be back in the theory crafting seat. I'm going to be hopping on live stream hopefully soon. It's been a silent day. I can't tell you how good it feels, like how highly stressed and highly strung like you get in the fucking construction noise all day, and you're balancing all these like juicy lore concepts in your head. But really appreciate, guys, really appreciate everyone who's also a YouTube member on the channel, all of the Patreon crew whose your cards will be rolling at the end. Thank you so much, guys, for supporting, allowing me to basically be a deranged, unhinged lore maniac. And leaving off on one final point from Picture in the Past, Jack Klein, the guy who was looking for his friends, the whole thing about the Aerith's painting detail that Najima has just recently written in, more clones, more identities of clones, specifically on the part about war being sown on the planet and the effect that it has. There's also a section where Jack Klein met Ifauna. He said, a woman named Ifauna who taught me about planetology. She was beautiful, strong featured. More than 15 years have gone by since I last saw her. I was just 9, and she once told me, and this stayed with Jack Klein all his life, Ifauna said, we're all connected to the live stream, the planet and you, the planet and Aerith, the planet and me. Every single one of us is connected, and that means we are all sharing in one great life force. That's why I believe we shouldn't fight with each other, but instead treat one another as friends. That way the planet can be happy, so time to make up. I do think that's very similar to how Advent Children was described, the geostigma, that it was the planet's anger, it was its wrath. It's that when humans are negligent, when they're evil towards one another, when they fight, when they war, that not only does it upset the balance of, yeah, literally life, the planet, the life stream, but it also has real tangible consequences on the planet itself. And I just think that those consequences are absolutely being sown in intentionally, And that's why we have a Shinra Wutai war. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. And see you in the next video. Copo!
You see is what you get.